Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Today is explanation of Renegade Immortal episode number 60 based on novel. So let's start. The old man looked at Wang Lin and casually said, like planet Suzaku, all of the surrounding planets will form rain dings as well after a certain amount of time. Wang Lin's eyes were calm as he slowly asked, when do the celestial doors open? The old man laughed and asked, what? Are you tempted? In truth, with your cultivation level, although it will be dangerous, as long as you're careful, you don't have to worry too much. After all, the stronger your cultivation is, the greater the restriction placed on you is. Wang Lin raised his head and asked the old man, why is it like that? The old man picked up the gourd and drank the last bit of wine. He licked his lips and said, the ancient celestial realm has already shattered and only exists in fragments, so the laws of heaven and earth are chaotic inside. This is key because if spiritual energy fluctuations of late-stage soul formation or later cultivators appear, then that fragment will collapse. Of course, depending on the size of the fragment, some can support stronger spiritual energy fluctuations. Thus, as long as the person entering doesn't want to commit suicide, then they would keep their power at the soul formation level. As Wang Lin pondered a bit, a dozen thoughts entered his head. After a long time, he raised his head and said, Senior came to visit Junior this late at night. I'm afraid you aren't here just to talk to me about this. The old man let out a mischievous laugh and said, young man, this old man came to tell you that I am leaving. Before I leave, I want you to make me a carving of myself so I can give it to Xiao Kui from the Pink Pavilion so that when she thinks of me, she will have something to remind her. Alas, someone as handsome as me, who only appears in legends, has countless people thinking of me. With that, he revealed a very regretful expression, but within that expression, there was a lot of pride. He kept looking toward Wang Lin, obviously waiting for Wang Lin to praise him. Wang Lin pondered for a while. After a long time, he picked up a piece of wood and, using his finger as a knife, began to carve. However, just as he made a rough outline, the old man let out a dissatisfied snort and said, no cloth. Wang Lin's finger paused. He let out a bitter smile. After pondering for a while, he wiped the carving with his right hand and began carving again. This time, his finger didn't stop. It moved like the wind. Soon, a skinny old man who looked almost like a monkey was carved out. Aside from the violent domain, the wood carving looked exactly like the old man himself. It was very lifelike, as if it were alive. Even the wrinkles on his face were clearly detailed. The old man quickly grabbed the carving and carefully examined it. The more he looked at it, the tighter his brow furrowed, until he finally looked at Wang Lin and said, what is this? It doesn't look like me. It doesn't look like me at all. Is this how you see this old man? What you carved here is a monkey, do you understand? With that, the old man threw the carving to the side and said to Wang Lin, word for word, it doesn't look like me. At this moment, the old man was filled with a serious look that had never appeared in his eyes before. There was even a hint of madness in those eyes. Wang Lin noticed the sudden change and that the spiritual energy in the area began to move in a certain way. Suddenly, he felt a sense of danger emerging. Wang Lin always had guesses about the old man's cultivation level, but at this moment, his estimate of the old man's cultivation level raised again. He looked at the old man as he picked up another piece of wood. This time, his hand moved like the wind. He used only half the time to make the carving this time. The person in the carving was very handsome and romantic, especially the piercing eyes. It would not be wrong to call this person one of the most handsome men in existence. Only, this looked way too different from the old man. Anyone who wasn't blind would be able to tell that this wasn't the same person as the old man. The moment the wood carving was completed, it was taken by the old man. He stared at the wood carving and his eyes shined as he laughed. Not bad, this is the real me. You carved really well. Okay, young man, I'll let you borrow that straw hat for a while. The old man dreamily looked at the wood carving. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. After putting it away, he looked at Wang Lin with a pleased look and said, from now on, just carve them like this. I have to be honest, although the carving you have now is a bit different from what this old man looks like, it is okay to ignore it. What is most important is that this carving looks exactly like me when I was younger. As the old man spoke, he stood up to leave. As he got to the door, he suddenly stopped and said, there are still 999 more carvings left. Don't forget about them once you reach the soul formation stage. Don't forget, or no matter where you go, this old man will find you. After sending off the strange old man, Wang Lin picked up the carving from before. He let out a smile and casually placed it on a shelf. Wang Lin don't intend to get mixed into the matter with the celestial doors. If he could reach the soul formation stage, he would take a trip to there then, but thinking about it now was too early. As for the battle between the Four-Sect Alliance and Shui Yu, Wang Lin pondered a bit and decided to not participate. These type of things' influence range was too wide. If anything went wrong, there would be serious consequences. Therefore, Wang Lin's life calmed down again. As for the snow in the Four-Sect Alliance, it began to slow down after a month. It was very common to see the flashes of light from magic treasures in the sky. It was as if there were cultivators repairing something up there. Wang Lin observed for a while and noticed that they were setting up formations. The formations were set in the sky to stop the snow from falling. At the same time, besides setting up the formations, massive amounts of cultivators from all sects and families came to clean up the snow on the ground. Spiritual energy seemed to have little effect against the snow. The snow seemed to be very sensitive to spiritual energy. Thus, these cultivators began to use physical strength to clear it out. Since the cultivators had moved, the mortals followed suit. The mortal king of the country seemed to have already received orders from the cultivators, so large amounts of mortal troops began to clear out the snow. Because the Four-Sect Alliance was very large, not only was the army clearing out snow, even the citizens were being forced to help. Da Nyo was one of them. Even old men who were at the end of their years were no exception, but under the orders the king, who had been paying his respects to him, no one bothered Wang Lin. This whole operation lasted several months. Da Nyo had already been sent to the south. The entire capital, no, all of the cities in the Four-Sect Alliance were a lot emptier. Unless someone had an important position, almost everyone was out clearing snow. During this operation, not even women and children were spared. When Da Nyo was picked up, Wang Lin gave him a wood carving to keep close to himself as a gift for these past 30+ years. As for Da Nyo's wife, Wang Lin also gave her a small wood carving. The effect of these wood carvings was to spread warmth to prevent the body from being frozen. In the battle that was originally supposed to be between cultivators, the mortals of the Four-Sect Alliance became the first to suffer. These mortals didn't even know what was causing this snow, but to save their families from it, they willingly entered this ruthless snow. Throughout the Four-Sect Alliance, there were mountains of snows piled up, and with the help of some powerful cultivators, these mountains kept growing. There was no harvest from the fields, as all of it had been covered by the snow. Every day there were countless mortals that froze to death, and every day there were houses crushed by the snow. This was a disaster. Wang Lin woke up one morning and walked out of his shop. The street had been cleared of snow, but there were still snowflakes on the ground. Although the snowfall had weakened, it still existed. A few days ago, the large-eared cultivator, Ju Wutai, sent another jade. There was no invitation to the Four-Sect Alliance, but news of what the Four-Sect Alliance was doing and one piece of heaven-splitting news. Thanks to the entire population of the country clearing snow, the snow covering the ground had lessened, only now there were very tall mountains of snow. In addition to this, almost all of the cultivators in the Four-Sect Alliance had been invited to help with the battle to come. However, Ju Wutai also brought up his own worries. Normally, Shui Yu wouldn't rain snow for months. They normally only let it snow for 10 days. They would come after those 10 days were up. Normally, during large battles, cultivators would avoid affecting the mortal world. This was a rule set by the country Suzaku. But as of today, 4 months had passed and the snow in the sky had not lessened. It had only been hidden by the formations. This type of phenomenon only had one interpretation, and it was, Shui Yu was planning on wiping out the Four-Sect Alliance by starting a war to wipe out the entire country. On the planet Suzaku, war to wipe out a country was rare, as the country Suzaku was around to interfere, but it wasn't something that hadn't happened before. In the ancient record of the Four-Sect Alliance, it was recorded that there were a total of 4 wars that wiped out a country. 3 were rank 4 cultivation countries and 1 was a rank 5 cultivation country. But without exception, all wars that wiped out a country had Suzaku's hand in it. That is to say that Shui Yu used various methods to make Suzaku agree to allow Shui Yu to start this war. Wang Lin pondered for a bit about Ju Wutai's worries. Although the Four-Sect Alliance didn't have much to do with him, he did live on this street for over 30 years. He was currently standing outside the shop and looking at the snow as he let out a sigh. The last thing Ju Wutai mentioned on the jade was that in order to check if Shui Yu was really going to start a country-ending war, the Four-Sect Alliance sent out cultivators to gather information. They sent out a total of 3 groups, one to the nearby rank 4 countries who were allies, the other to the rank 5 cultivation country they belonged to for reinforcements, and finally, the last group went to Suzaku to discover the truth. As of the day the jade was sent out, only the group to Suzaku hadn't returned. The response caused everyone in the Four-Sect Alliance to become silent. All of the allied rank 4 cultivation countries welcomed the Four-Sect Alliance and treated them with respect, but none of them would talk about the war, they only dodged the subject. There were even some that just avoided meeting them completely. Finally, another country, which had a very good relationship with them, told them that the rank 5 cultivation countries had sent down orders to not enter this affair. As for the group that entered the rank 5 cultivation country, their faces were even darker when they returned. The rank 5 cultivation country told them that there was no need to give them the rain cauldron, as they won't help. Finally, this group of cultivators spent a great deal of effort to get a piece of information from a soul transformation cultivator in the rank 5 cultivation country that shocked them all. There was a woman in Shueyu whose talent was so stunning that it even caught Suzaku's eyes. She had only cultivated for 100 years and had already reached the late stage of soul formation. She had been named the number 1 genius on planet Suzaku in the last 10,000 years. If that was it, it wouldn't be much, but this girl hadn't consumed any pills in these 100 years, so that made her even more eye-catching. For this matter, Suzaku sent out cultivators to investigate this. After confirming it was true, Suzaku officially invited her to join them. This kind of thing was not uncommon. Many of the extremely talented youths would be invited to join Suzaku during their most brilliant moments. But when these people joined Suzaku, their status was very low, but for her, Suzaku was determined and gave her a very high position. The reason why Suzaku was doing this was to try and cross that gap that they had been trying to cross for countless years, become a rank 7 cultivation country. However, in order to become a rank 7 cultivation country, not only would they need a cultivator to achieve the needed cultivation level, they also needed to meet a series of requirements. It was very difficult. At this moment, Suzaku hadn't even met the first requirement, so they paid a great deal of attention to the talented younger generation. And this woman from Shueyu's talent was already incredible. As a result, Suzaku made a lot of preparations. The only request she had was to make Shueyu a rank 5 cultivation country and to allow them to move out of that barren wasteland into another location on planet Suzaku. By coincidence, a rain cauldron had appeared in the Four-Sect Alliance and it just happened to be from a cultivator from Shueyu, so this war was started. The Four-Sect Alliance caught Shueyu's eyes due to the battle for the rain cauldron and became the new location for Shueyu's invasion. As for why did the rain cauldron appear in the Four-Sect Alliance and why it appeared in the king's hand, the Four-Sect Alliance believed it was a scheme. Only now, whether it was a scheme or not won't change reality. After this information was brought back by the cultivators, it shocked everyone. After Wang Lin had read everything in the Jade Ju Wutai gave him, his heart was a bit heavy. He didn't think that in a simple battle for the rain cauldron, there was something this deep hidden inside. He felt very regretful as he looked at the empty street and empty shops. A few months ago, there were many people walking on the street, and all of the shops would open up early and be very busy. But due to the war between the two cultivation countries, the mortals were hit hard. Wang Lin let out a sigh. At this moment, he felt very regretful. Mortals were lower than ants in the cultivator's eyes, but many of them forgot that they were also mortals once. Wang Lin didn't have any method of preventing this and he didn't want to get involved. The heavens Daos were ruthless and after experiencing the life and death domain, his mentality had changed. He looked at the street and gently said, "It is time to leave. After finishing the last step, it will be time to leave." With that, he shook his head. He turned around and gently closed the shop's door. After that, with his hands behind his back and wearing a thick coat, he walked into the distance. Slowly, his figure faded in the snow. Wang Lin's body looked slow while moving in the air, but in fact, he was moving very quickly. As he flew, he saw countless cultivators and everyone that passed him had gloomy looks on their faces. It was as if the snow was a giant rock on top of their hearts. Even the ones that knew each other didn't talk at all. At most, they would nod at each other when they passed by one another. Wang Lin flew the entire way and after a while, he arrived at the eastern part of the Four-Sect Alliance. Before, this was a thick forest, but now, it was covered in snow. The pile of snow looked like a giant mountain range next to the area that had been cleared out. Waves of cold came from this snow. There was a sense of desperation. Wang Lin silently floated in the air. He looked down on the snowfield and pondered for a long time. Finally, he let out a sigh. Both of his hands formed a seal that created a strange wind that blew across the field, creating a wind that sounded like people crying. At this moment, it felt as if the heavens and earth were filled with this sad cry. The snow continued to fall and the wind continued to blow, just like the endless heavens. Only this snow was very strange. Even though the wind was strong, not much snow moved. Luckily, Wang Lin's objective wasn't to clear out this forest. Wang Lin didn't reveal any panic on his face. He quietly stood in the air, his eyes calm. Gradually, a small whirlpool appeared in the snow-covered forest and the snow began to slowly move to the side. Wang Lin had been standing in the air for a long time. Some of the cultivators that flew by were taking notice of him. Eventually, the swirl in the snow grew even larger, until it formed a giant hole in the snow. In the hole, there were countless tree branches. Wang Lin took one look. His hand formed a seal and he went down into the swirl. Inside the swirl were large trees and branches. These were materials for his carvings. More than 30 years ago, he got all of his wood here, however, he had used most of it up, and there wasn't enough for his final carving. This was why he didn't mind coming so far. The carving he was making this time required trees at least 100 years old. Of course, if there were any 1,000-year-old trees, the effect would be even better. Unfortunately, trying to find that kind of wood in this snow was like searching for a needle in the sea. In the swirl, Wang Lin spread out his divine sense to find the branches he needed. After getting all the ones he could, he came out of the swirl and used the same technique on the snow nearby. Gradually, as 100-meter swirls appeared in the snow, the amount of wood in Wang Lin's bag of holding increased. This continued for 7 days. In these 7 days, this entire area had been cleared out. After getting enough wood, Wang Lin took another look at this place, then left. In these 7 days, his actions had been noticed by the cultivators passing by and word spread across the four-sect alliance. People were sent to check it out, but once they noticed Wang Lin's cultivation level, they became very respectful. Eventually, Zhu Wutai heard of this and immediately suppressed the news. He personally brought people there. They didn't talk, only silently helped. Otherwise, there is no way for Wang Lin to gather enough wood in 7 days, or clear out the area. Before Wang Lin left, Zhu Wutai didn't try to invite him into the four-sect alliance again. He clasped his hands with a bitter smile and left. Zhu Wutai knew that the four-sect alliance was at the end of its days. Bringing someone in now would only be dragging them down. Even he himself had been considering his own escape. Wang Lin nodded at Zhu Wutai and left. He didn't stop at all, but charged toward his shop in the capital. When he was outside the capital, his body disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already inside the shop. He took a deep breath and looked at his surroundings. He sat down on his chair, waved his left hand, and took out a piece of wood that still had snow on it. He formed a blade with the middle and index fingers of his right hand and began to carve. This was a carving that Wang Lin had been preparing for a long time. This time, he wasn't just carving one, but many. Before he leaves, his road of turning into a mortal was coming to an end. He hoped to use these last carvings to reach the soul formation stage. Even if he eventually failed, then at least his mentality would progress by one step, placing him even closer to the soul formation stage or at a point where he only needed to pick a domain before stepping into the soul formation stage. What he decided to carve was every single person he had killed, from when he started cultivating, to when he started to turn into a mortal, every single person. The first person that Wang Lin had killed was his master, Sun Dazhu. As his hand moved, wood shavings fell to the floor. Not long after, Sun Dazhu's moment of death, that look of fear and despair, was perfectly captured in the carving. Wang Lin's heart was completely calm as he stared at Sun Dazhu's carving. If Sun Dazhu wasn't so greedy for Wang Lin's gourd, then he wouldn't have died. That was karma. Where there is life, there is also death. The second carving was that of a middle-aged man. This person's eyes contained a hint of blood, his lips were very thin, and his face looked very mean. At this point, there was a flying sword in his hand. This sword looked very sharp. Killing intent leaked out of this carving. He was Zhonghu's master and old man Jimor's disciple, the second person Wang Lin had killed. That day, that person decided to kill Wang Lin, but became the second person Wang Lin had ever killed. After looking at the wood carving, he put it to the side and took out another piece of wood. The third was a young man. It was Teng Li, who hunted Wang Lin down back then. Thinking about Teng Li, Wang Lin's heart rippled, but soon calmed down once more. Scenes of his fight with Teng Li echoed in his head. After a long time, his right finger turned into a knife and he worked on the piece of wood. Half an hour later, Teng Li's carving was complete. This person looked very handsome, but there was a look of extreme pride on his face. His right hand formed a seal, his gaze was dark, hiding a deep sense of greed, and the corner of his mouth hid a faint smile. But this smile was something of the past and had been lost in history. Along with the smile, the entire Ting family bloodline was also lost. One by one, wood carvings were finished by Wang Lin and were placed to the side. Gradually, the ground became covered in wood carvings. The killing intent in the room gradually became denser. Every time a carving was finished, the room would become a bit more packed. If a cultivator were to pass by, they would clearly see that besides the snow, there was also a layer of ice on top of Wang Lin's roof. Wang Lin didn't even bother with it at all. He was absorbed in his memories as he carved every single person he had killed. Gradually, Wang Lin forgot that he was carving and dove deep into his memories. 400 years of memories appeared in his mind and he watched it all as if it was someone else's. From the boy at the beginning, to the youth at the Hengyu sect, to not being talented enough, to finding the heaven-defying bead, to Sichu Nan teaching him, to the Hengyu sect being kicked out of their mountain. Then he left the Hengyu sect and cultivated on his own. After that, he found Zhong Hu, killed Zhong Hu's master, and entered Ting family city, but Teng Li came out of nowhere. Because of that, he split up with Zhong Hu. Even now, he didn't know if Zhong Hu lived or was killed. Teng Li, who hunted him, ended up dying by his hand and thus began the road of conflict. The Corpse sect, then Juming Valley, and the moment that completely changed his life. The death of his parents. Ting Huayuan's smile, his body being destroyed, and Sichu Nan helping his soul escape to the foreign battleground. This led to 400 years of killing. In order to raise his cultivation level so he could go back and get revenge, he became a heartless, unfeeling, and cold-blooded person. Hu Fen, the Sea of Devils, and the land of the ancient god. Scenes from all these places flashed before his eyes. 10,000 devil killing order. Other than the slaughter of the Teng family, that was the time he killed the most. As for inside the land of the ancient god, Wang Lin's memories of Hunchback Meng and them were deep and hard to forget. The many years inside the land of the ancient god was a big change for him. Both his body and mind underwent great changes. There were also many dangers inside. If he wasn't careful, he wouldn't have been able to come out. Soon after, he formed his nascent soul in Chu and once again met Li Muwen. After he successfully reached the nascent soul stage, he could finally begin his revenge. Anyone with the Teng family bloodline within Zhao died by Wang Lin's hands, resolving this grudge. Wang Lin's hand still hadn't stopped moving once as he carved the people in his memories. His hand moved faster and faster until you could only see a blur. The images appeared in his mind faster and faster. Gradually, he saw the 30 years he had spent turning into a mortal. Birth and death, scenes of life slowly imprinted into Wang Lin's mind. Much later, he no longer had any memories in his mind. There were only two words now, life and death, the changes that occur in the heavens' reincarnation. Wang Lin understood the meaning of death in his 400 years of killing, and in his 30 years of turning into a mortal, he came to understand life. Although he failed when tried to comprehend the heavens' reincarnation cycle before, it left a deep impression on him. It was as if he had poked through a piece of paper and it allowed him to gain this insight, but insight does not mean comprehension. It can only be said that Wang Lin's state of mind had reached a point where he could control his cultivation. There was one phrase that was said a lot in the ancient cultivation world: what you see as mountain, is a mountain, and what you see as water, is water. Wang Lin was currently at this stage. When he opened his eyes, there were countless carvings inside his shop. There was an evil light in Wang Lin's eyes. This light was very similar to Ta Sen's from the land of the ancient god. He calmly looked at all of the carvings before him and slowly raised his hands. Suddenly, all of the wood carvings began to tremble and gathered toward his hands. Gradually, more and more carvings flew to him, but at this moment, a black vortex appeared between his hands. Even though the wood carvings went in one by one, the size of the black vortex didn't change at all. One by one, the wood carvings flew into the black vortex. After the last one entered, Wang Lin calmly looked at the black vortex. At this moment, the bag of holding on his waist opened up and 3 balls of killing intent flew out. The 3 balls of killing intent entered the black vortex. When the last one entered, Wang Lin's eyes revealed a mysterious light and his hand began to move. The black vortex quickly changed shapes under Wang Lin's control. Finally, it turned into a square and gradually became solid. Slowly, the black vortex disappeared and a black stamp appeared before Wang Lin. The stamp was the size of Wang Lin's palm and had the carving of a person on it, but this person didn't have a face or features, only a figure. This black stamp contained Wang Lin's 400 years of killing. It was the physical form of death. Wang Lin's right hand pressed down on top of the black stamp. A sense of being submerged in blood suddenly appeared in his heart. Then he took a deep breath and the stamp gradually entered his nascent soul. Wang Lin pondered for a little while looking at the shop he had lived in for 30 years with a lingering expression. He waved his hand and all of the carvings inside the shop disappeared. Then he opened the door of the shop and walked into the snowy night. Wang Lin slowly walked on the street as the snowstorm got even worse. His figure when he walked out from the shop was still that of an old man at the end of his days, but as he walked toward the end of the street, his back gradually straightened. The wrinkles on his face slowly disappeared, and by the time he arrived at the end of the street, he had successfully changed from a mortal to a cultivator. Although he hadn't reached the soul formation stage yet, he was even closer to it now. After learning of the life and death domain and comprehending the heavens, Wang Lin's body had a strong desire to fly up. It was as if there were some mysterious power in the sky that was pulling him toward it. This feeling meant that he was about to reach the soul formation stage. Him now didn't need to search for a domain or comprehend the heavens, he only needed to find a place to quietly go into closed-door cultivation for 10 years in and he would be able to reach the soul formation stage. Wang Lin stood at the end of the road and carefully looked at the empty street. He had lived on this old street for more than 30 years. He engraved every detail, even each blade of grass, of this street into his mind. A hint of sadness appeared in his heart. After looking for a long time, he memorized this sight. He let out a sigh and disappeared into the night. In a town 10,000 kilometers to the north, there was a large amount of mortals. There were simple houses spread across the area and inside them lived a lot of people. They were all brought here to help clean up the snow. Da Nyo lived inside one of these houses. There were 30 more people living inside the house with him, making the already not so large house feel every cramped. Da Nyo stared soullessly at the ceiling. He missed his son, his wife, and most of all, Wang Lin. Everything disappeared in the face of this snow. Before this snow, he was someone who had spare time and a shopkeeper who had a few people working under him. His son entered an immortals sect and became an immortal. On that street, he could be said to be doing very well. He and his wife had always loved each other. Life was filled with joy. He even intended to stop Uncle Wang from carving in a few years and serve him for the last few years of his life. In his mind, the death of his parents made him think of Uncle Wang, who watched him grow up, as his own elder. But this snow changed everything. He didn't know how his wife was doing right now. When he heard a few months ago that even women were being taken to clear snow, he was very nervous. His wife's body had never been that good. Could her body withstand the cold snow? This video will end here. Thank you for watching.